Hello and welcome to our latest episode of This Day and Age. My name is Phil Tower, and in this special episode, we're going to highlight the critical need for dementia care training for caregivers of individuals living with dementia. In just a moment, we are going to meet two family members who recently received specialized training at the recently established Dementia Institute here in Grand Rapids. Now, both of our guests, Susan and Annie, are joining us on this special episode to share their journey caring for a loved one living with dementia. They're living it every day. They'll be talking about some of the challenges they faced before receiving that training. Susan and Annie will also be sharing their own insight into how the training has transformed their caregiving, how it's improved interactions for them, and most importantly, improved the quality of life for both them and their loved one. We'll also have a chance to explore the really profound impact of dementia care training and offer valuable advice for you, especially knowing that you may likely be a caregiver in the future, or maybe you're already a caregiver navigating this challenging path. In fact, quote from Rosalind Carter, the great Rosalind Carter, she said, "There are only four kinds of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver." Very powerful quote. It's a pleasure to welcome Susan Lucas. She's a Dementia Institute client. She received the training. And also Annie Edwards. Annie's with us as well. You're going to hear a little bit of background noise from Annie and Susan because we're not in a studio. They're at home because they're caregiving. They're living this life 24/7. And I am really honored to thank you, Annie, first of all, for being here. And Susan, thank you for being here as well. I want to start a little bit and have you, Annie, and then you, Susan, introduce yourself. Annie, would you talk a little bit about yourself and the family member you are providing care for? And then Susan, we'll have you follow her. Go ahead, Annie.
I'm Annie Edwards, and I'm a retired teacher with Grand Rapids Public Schools. I've been kind of taking care of my husband since maybe like 2018. That's when I started noticing things. We lost our youngest son to brain cancer in 2016. So I guess I was so busy caring for him, I missed a lot of things. But when I finally saw what was going on, I thought I needed to do something. Went to my doctor. He said it's normal aging. So we've been on this journey for quite a while now.
And when was your husband first diagnosed with dementia?
After I kept bugging my primary doctor, sent him to Pine Rest. And the psychologist out there saw him, gave him a test, and said, yes, there's a tremendous cognitive decline. And so they didn't get an official diagnosis. The doctors just referred to it as dementia, a form of dementia. I checked with his sister because I knew his father had something. And his sister said, well, that was vascular dementia. So we kind of went with that diagnosis for a while. And then we started visiting neurologists, and that they did a brain scan. His brain didn't show any sign of stroke or anything. So they said that didn't fit. Then my husband had quite a career playing football, high school, college, service, and semi-pro. So they said maybe it's due to head injury, but that can't be diagnosed. And so they were just guessing, start giving him medicine that is used for Alzheimer's, and they were just guessing. They didn't really know. It wasn't until just recently this year that we finally got a diagnosis. They had done the PET scan, which normally shows the amyloids for Alzheimer's. Nothing showed up. His brain showed that it was clear. So just recently, they came out with a PET amyloid, and I was doing some research online and saw it. So I called the neurologist's office because he had mentioned to it that it was out, that Trinity was just trying to get it where patients could afford it. So when I Googled, I found out what it was, and that at this point, Medicare was paying for, because it's a $10,000 x-ray. And so they did it. We took him down to that New Michigan State lab because Trinity didn't do it. And yep, that's where it was officially diagnosed as Alzheimer's.
So that was just this year?
This year, yeah.
Thank you for the background. And your husband is with you at home every day, and you are caregiving 24/7, and we'll be talking about that.
Okay.
Susan Lucas is also with us. Susan, could you share a little bit about your background and the person you're caring for?
Sure. I'm the youngest of three girls. I'm a teacher. I don't say that I'm retired because I'm not officially retired from anything, but I haven't been in a classroom for a long time. I come from a family of teachers. I come from a family of history lovers and travel lovers. And I was living overseas teaching and coming back in the summers. And one summer, I'm like, boy, Mom and Dad could really benefit from having a daughter living closer. And I had seen them take so much time and care and attention with all of their parents when they were getting older. And I had told them and told myself that I had wanted to do that. So I moved back to the U.S. to live life next to Mom and Dad. A couple of years later, my dad passed away rather suddenly, and I just slid into being my mom's full-time care partner. Now, my mom has Parkinson's, and so her dementia comes through Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm.
And how long has she been with dementia and Parkinson's, Susan?
Definitely seen cognitive decline over the last 10 years, but probably more pronounced in the last, 3 or 4.
And you've both received training from the Dementia Institute, but I want to back up before we talk about that training, which has been obviously very important for you. Talk about what your days were like before reaching out and receiving that training. And if you could, for our listeners, just compare and contrast that. And Susan, I'll start with you first. Before you received the training, you're living the life of a caregiver every day. What was it like?
What is it like? We're fortunate that we can have home health aides come in about 20, 25 hours a week. But, night and day, the call is at 2 a.m., then you get up and help. If the call is at 2 p.m., you're on. I think one of the aspects of the journey that everyone is going to find is that your roles change. And I remember when my dad was my mom's primary caregiver, it was so hard for him to step into the role of meal planner and meal preparer. And my mom had always done that. And he actually took he went right for it, and he actually took a little cooking class, and she would help, but it was such a hard thing for him to have that role change. And for me, I think, I've gone from being a daughter to a whole broad cast of characters. Sometimes I'm friend, sometimes I'm sister, sometimes I'm mother. And I don't quite know at any given moment who I am for my mother at that time. And some people ask, well, does she know who you are? And I always respond with, well, I always know who she is.
Annie, what about you? What were some of the biggest challenges you faced before receiving dementia care training?
When my husband got so he couldn't tell me things that he wanted, at first I didn't think anything about it, because he would start a sentence and he'd say, oh, what's the name? He had that habit. So I didn't really think too much of it. But then he got so he really couldn't pronounce things and tell me things that he wanted to do. And I would try to figure out, well, tell me what you want. Show me what you do. What do I do with it? And we kind of struggled through that. And when I took the class and they explained to me that I guess that's one of the first things, they lose the ability to say nouns, then that was making sense to me. And they gave us some clues about how we, guide them through it. And I always remembered they said, you have to try to validate, because it's hard for them too. Then I realized, it must be really hard for him, because he was also an educator. He was a principal and everything. All of a sudden, he can't tell you what he wants, And he had given up driving a few years back because he also has glaucoma, and that takes away the peripheral vision. Well, that's the other thing that the class cleared up for me, because so does dementia. Yeah. And then I thought, oh my goodness, he's really struggling. So it opened up a lot of things for me and to help me care for him on a daily basis. As I'm watching him now, he's going through some of the stages that they mentioned. And that's been really helpful for me.
You know, Annie, I want to ask you, and Susan, same with you, but I'll ask you first, Annie. Was there a series of things that prompted you to say, yes, I need to reach out and get some real help here, some training? And then how did you learn about the Dementia Institute? And Annie, I'll let you go
Well,
first.
the funniest thing, there was an email that came to in my email explaining about the Dementia Institute. And I really didn't know where it came from, but I had recently, my primary doctor had referred us to palliative care at Holland Home. So I just assumed that it came from them. And I was reading, what the class would offer. And I thought, I could really use this, it could help me. But my hardest part was figuring how I could do it, because there was, at that point, I wasn't using a home health aide. It was all on me. So I picked the morning class, and that helped because I'm not too far from there. So I could just say, stay in bed, go back to sleep. I'll be home in an hour. And that worked out for us. But it was very helpful because I didn't understand what I was going through until I did that class.
Isn't that funny how we all curse email? And there was an email from the Dementia Institute that was a game changer for you. I love that story, Annie. Susan, what about you? Was there a tipping point? Was there a thing that happened where you said, man, I need to get outside help? And then how did you learn about the Dementia Institute?
So as a caregiver, you're always looking at what's happening and analyzing it and trying to figure out, where does this come from? Do I need to do anything? Is this something to ask a medical professional about? Is this something I can make some change about? Do we need a medicine for this? Do we not need a medicine? And I felt about a year ago that I was pretty well on top of all of the things regarding Parkinson's. And I knew what my resources were, and I knew where to go, and things were as smooth as they can be. Things were pretty smooth in terms of caregiving for a person with Parkinson's. But I found myself getting tripped up with things related to the dementia. So I tell this story not proudly, but one of the difficulties was that we would run into conversations about her mother, about her parents, about other family members or neighbors who have all passed away. And I would explain, oh, this person has passed away. And I remember one time the extreme sadness on her face when I told her that her parents had passed away. And I try to tap into memories that I know that she has from those events, but she doesn't remember a lot. And so it was really shocking. Well, one night, like I said, this is not the good story. I was not very patient, and Mom wasn't very patient. And she said, well, I'm just going to go to Muskegon and talk to my neighbors because they'll tell me what happened to my parents, because you don't know. So I get out my phone and I start Googling obituaries for her neighbors. See, you can't ask this Mr. Mosner. He's passed away already. And it was at that point in the back of my head, I'm like, whoa, this is not the right approach, and you need a little help with that.
Well, you were both teachers, so you certainly can appreciate that, the right approach and the wrong approach. How did you find out about the Dementia Institute, Susan?
We live in a senior living community, and there was a newsletter that went around that had the information about it, and Googled it and saw the classes, and I thought, that could give me some tools that I need. And it has.
And how did that training, as soon as you had gone through the classes, how did that change you as a caregiver? I'd like you both to talk about that. And Susan, I'll let you go first. How did the Dementia Institute training up your game as a caregiver, if you will?
For that particular wall that I had kept hitting about how to deal with perceptions that she had, I learned the fluidity of time that people with dementia are in, and that there are some times when it's obvious my mom is tired or confused, and I was never expecting her to be, spot on. But then there are other times she seems very energetic and alert, and I was expecting that she was in this time, in this space, in this now. And that helped me to learn that actually, no, she can be anywhere. So I'll tell you a post-class, post-training conversation. We got a new baby in our family, and we were talking about the new baby and the fifth great grandchild. And I said to her, "Hey, Mom, who came to help you when you had your babies?" And she said, "Oh, you don't mean me. You mean Tressa. Tressa came to help." Well, Tressa is her aunt who lived with them when she was small, and especially when her twin brothers were born, and was a great help to her mother. Well, I'm not quite clued into things, and I say, "No, no, Mom, not Tressa. But what about you when you had your babies?" Now, she didn't answer with words, but she gave me this look that said, "That is crazy talk. I have never had any babies." And then I could realize, oh, wait, time shift. So she's back in her childhood and remembering her aunt. And so we just went on and we talked about her aunt and how wonderful and her twin brothers and just moved right on. And I didn't have any need to insist that, no, I was one of those babies.
That's a powerful real life example, Susan. I absolutely love that, how that training made you ready for that moment. Annie, what about you? When you get through the classes with the Dementia Institute, when did you recognize that it had made a difference for you and your caregiving?
Immediately, because I understood then, and I, was sharing some of the techniques that they told us, and I, in my mind, even today, it's give them validation. After I knew it, then I could be more sympathetic as he was going through things and try to, help him with it. My husband's very quiet. So like your mother would talk, he doesn't. And so I will be telling him things about people in his family or in our family, and he'll say, "I don't remember them," or "No, I don't." By the way, I never found out who referred us, who sent the information. I asked the palliative nurse. She didn't know. She said, "But it's a great class." She referred us to Mary Freebed's speech, and they put together a memory book. And we go over that where he's looking at his children, his grandchildren, at us, because there's times he can't remember me. He'll say, he can't remember my name. And I have a joke with him because every time he gets mad at me, my name comes out perfectly. So I always say, "You can't remember who I am till you get mad at me." We just kind of laugh about it. But it's caused me to be more patient with him as he's going through, now that I understand it, And it was so beneficial that I tried to talk my two sons that live here to go to that class. I said, that'll help you understand. And one moved back and in with us to help me care for him. And nope, they didn't. And I printed out some of the information. They didn't read it. I think it was too hard for them because they still wanted Dad to be Dad. And just recently, one of my sons was one of our former neighbors when they were growing up. His mother passed with Alzheimer's. And he talked to my son and said, "We need to go to lunch." And so they did, and they talked. And so now he's understanding more, and he's assisting me more with the caregiving.
If somebody's hearing this conversation, hearing you talk about the difference that you both have experienced after taking the training at the Dementia Institute, but they're on the fence, or they say, "I'm too busy. I have to do caregiving 24/7," and they're hesitant to get help, to get that kind of training. What would you say to those people who are stubborn or reluctant? Annie or Susan, either one?
I would just say it's so beneficial to me. I would just encourage them to, if they can rearrange their schedule, to take the class. And our church has an Alzheimer's support group. We've had it for, I don't know, maybe like 10 years. When it first started, I would go to the meetings, but of course I wasn't affected by it. And at that time, we were the only African-American church in Grand Rapids that had a support group. So once I took the class and I was telling the lady at our church about it, I said, it was so beneficial. So she asked me to come back to the group and let them know. And I did. And we've got people from everywhere, that some at the beginning stages of caregiving, some's been doing it for a while. And I've encouraged all of them, if you can go to that class. As he's getting, I know what he's doing now. I understand it. And I guess that's the teacher in me. I like to understand everything I'm doing. Yes. My daughter-in-law says I'm a lifelong learner, but I guess that's why it helped me so much.
Best kind of people. And Susan, for you, especially if you encounter somebody who's new in this journey, what would you say to them if they're hesitant about getting this kind of help in the training?
One of the things I found out is I went to the training with a particular need and frustration that I wasn't able to do the caregiving that I wanted to do, that I was more often getting frustrated with mom and mom getting frustrated with me. But the training gives you so much more than that thing that you go for. And like Annie already mentioned, when they talked about how the brain doesn't interpret what the eyes send into the brain well anymore, I was just like, eye-opening. I had on the list, I have to find geriatric ophthalmologist who's working with people with dementia because I can't figure out why my mom can't see well anymore.
Yeah.
And the answer is there's no hope for that, but I can make all kinds of adjustments. And so you're going to learn things that you didn't even know that you needed to know. And it's just going to help make your journey together much more positive and much more supportive. And I also say to you, if you say, I don't have time because I'm caregiving 24/7, then you need to make time because you can't caregive 24/7.
I really like that. You have to, as Susan just said, you have to give yourself a break. It will be against your nature, but you have to give yourself a break. And I want to just stop for a moment, celebrate both of you guys, because you did reach out. And that's really important. Now you're going to pay it forward. But I'm really curious because this is a long journey. Susan and Annie, you're both at different parts in this journey, but this is a long journey. And Annie, your husband played football. We know there are 4 quarters in a football game. We know how long the quarters are, depending on how many TV timeouts there are. But in this journey, it's an ongoing journey caring for a loved one with dementia, especially dementia and Parkinson's. Susan, looking ahead, looking down the road, maybe a year from now, how do you think that training has prepared you for the unknown and what's to come?
I think I was getting to this place and thinking about this already, but the training helped to see that the person with dementia is living in this moment, and it's their moment. She can be a child, she could be a college student, she could be a wife, she could be a mother, but she's in this moment. And I think for me, I just have to live in this moment. And if I look down the road, I have no idea how long the road is. It just goes on and on. And my caregiving journey could end very quickly or could end in another decade. And thinking about that isn't helpful, but learning to just live in the moment.
Yeah. Annie?
I'm just more relaxed, well, people convinced me that I finally had to get more respite. So I do have a home health aide coming in twice a week so I can bowl. I still keep up my bowling. I do things, go to lunch with my friends. That has helped me. So I'm more relaxed in my caregiving, and I understand the stages that's coming, he's going into. I think it has prepared me for what I have to deal with down the road. Because before I had no idea. And his sister lives in Missouri, and they're the only 2 out of 11 siblings. And she's an RN, and I was always on the phone. Now, what happened to your dad? What did he do? But come to find out, the cases were completely different, And I was always Googling things, but, they showed the progression of the brain. So I know he's probably got a long ways to go yet because he can still communicate. And he understands the nurse and also the therapist at Mary Freebird said he has aphasia. And I remember from that, when our son had a stroke, he could understand what I was saying, but he couldn't articulate it. So that helps me with when I'm communicating with him, and, I can enjoy him. We laugh. One of my best friends is also caring for her husband who has dementia. So we talk all the time. We laugh about some of the interactions that she has with her husband and I have with him. And I said, if we couldn't laugh about this, we couldn't make it, and we're both doing it at home. So, I think it was a tremendous experience for me.
Yeah, there's got to be a unique camaraderie with other people who are walking that same journey that both of you guys are. And the one thing I keep on hearing is that after the training, the communication thing is so much better. It truly, if you've ever been around somebody who has dementia, trying to understand how to communicate, like you were saying, Susan, not the obituary. What's the right thing to do here, in terms of communicating? But that Dementia Institute training really helped in terms of actually being able to understand each other.
Yeah.
I love that. To get personal, Susan and Annie, and this is important, I think about this because I've known caregivers. We're emotional beings, and it's okay to admit that. This is a journey where you feel 1,000 emotions, sometimes in a day, sometimes in half a day. How did that training help you to look inward and understand the emotional impact of caregiving?
I think one of the things, and Annie's talked about this already, is that when something happens that you don't expect, something that you didn't anticipate, it really has an emotional toll on you. You can get angry, you can get frustrated, you could get really sad. But knowing what's likely to be ahead, knowing that this is part of the game here, your expectations have shifted. And when you are expecting, oh, this could happen, or, oh, I learned about this, then it really helps your emotional aspect to stay steady and calm. And so I feel like it really helped to set my expectations for what our interactions were going to be like, what's going to come down the road, and so forth.
You know what I love about both of you? You both laughed at yourselves. You've laughed with others. That laughter is probably the best emotional medicine there is out there. Even, like you said, Annie, laughing with your husband when he suddenly remembers your name, when he's mad at you. I absolutely love that story. Do you see laughter? Do you see emotion ranges in the people you're caregiving for? Susan with your mom, Annie with your husband. Can you talk about that a little bit?
My husband doesn't smile much anymore. That I miss. And even when it's humorous when we're trying to get him to take a picture and we say, smile, he just can't do it anymore. And of course I can laugh at this is not my first time taking care of someone with dementia. So I think I can say the difference between the two cases. We cared for my last living aunt until she was 100 years old. She passed away in 2015. And I guess she had gotten into dementia maybe 3-4 years seriously. And at that point, he and I were her only caregiver. And I didn't really understand anything about the disease. And I would go to her house. She just lived about 5 minutes away. And she would upset me so. I would come home and I'd say to him, you have to call and check on her. I can't talk to her for a few days. So I was more frustrated with that. Now when I'm caring for him, since I've been through the class, I understand the disease more. I don't go through that.
Susan?
I think what you said about laughter, I was going to remember this joke forever, but this summer family was around and there was some joke that had something to do with old age. And my niece and nephews, they're in their 20s and 30s. They're like, oh, that's a funny joke. My mother actually burst out laughing. And it's so unexpected. And I also have a photograph of her when she's interacting with that new baby who's now 4 months old. And as she's reaching out to the little one for the first time, she has such an animated and alive and loving and welcoming face. And because you just lose those emotions as a person with dementia. And so when you get a chance to see those, then it's really precious.
That is really beautiful. I absolutely love that. So you guys are the experts. I mean, you've been living the life. You've gotten this.
We've been living the life. I don't know.
Well, that's another thing. But you've gotten this great training through the Dementia Institute. There are people listening to us on this podcast that are beginning this caregiving journey, or they're going to be, and this conversation has certainly prompted them to think about it. It's your turn to give some wisdom and some advice, the best advice, maybe one or two things that you would like to share with the caregivers and the future caregivers listening to us right now. Annie?
Well, I can only remember being patient with them and always validate them. And so I try to do that every day when I'm with him. I try to keep my voice down. I don't, shout at him. I talk to him. Let him feel that he's still important, that he still can contribute, is how I try to handle him on a daily basis. And I would say that for anybody, because it's so easy to get frustrated the way I did with my aunt, because I didn't understand it. And I knew she wasn't being mean, but, I just internalized it so different. But with him, I'm always trying to be caring, kind, always validate him. If he needs help, just recently, I discovered he's having trouble putting his sock on his right leg. So I'm always ready to help, kind words. When he's doing the other dressing, I'm like, oh, good, you got that brain working. That's good. Let's go. But when it's time for me to help him with that, I just get on my knees and do it,
Annie, and Susan, before you even said that, I knew that was the way you were doing it because as we got ready for this conversation this morning, I could hear in the background you were helping your husband as he was putting the sock on. And I heard a gentle, caring voice. And I was like, I love that. I love that because it'd be so easy to get frustrated. Susan, you're the expert. You've got a world of wisdom as a caregiver for your mom, dealing with both Parkinson's and dementia. What are some important things caregivers and future caregivers listening to us need to know?
Not so specific, but in general, get all the resources you can. This is not a journey you can do alone. It's really not. And respite care is good, but you need resources. Gather in people, gather in friends, family, church members, neighbors, and no one person is going to do everything with you, but know who your team is. This is who, can help with this. This is who can help with this. And, training at the Dementia Institute, reading articles, going to support groups, talking to other people. Caregiving is not a journey you can do by yourself. Having your sister-in-law that you can call. I have sisters I can call. Sometimes you just need to call and vent. And they know that this is not for them to solve. They're just taking it in and letting it go so I don't have to hold it.
Well, as Annie said, it's a lifelong process, this thing called learning. You're always learning. You're always educating yourself. And what a perfect thing to have this conversation with two caregivers, two teachers. I absolutely love it. And I know those listening to this podcast episode are cheering you guys on from home or wherever they are. And I want to celebrate you both for what you're doing. Thank you for being wonderful guests and for sharing, kind of pulling the curtain back on the life you are living 24/7. I really, really think it's a wonderful thing. And I know without a doubt, you guys have helped our listeners and really helped them to begin thinking about this process if they're not there yet. So Annie Edwards, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
Susan Lucas, thank you.
Sure.
And good luck on your journey to both of you. Again, I want to thank our guests, Annie Edwards and Susan Lucas, both Dementia Institute clients, both newly empowered caregivers, rock stars of caregiving, if you will. And I want to thank you for listening to this episode of This Day and Age. Don't forget to visit our website, thisdayandage.org. You can catch up on all of our past episodes, and we would love it, especially after you've heard this episode. Subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any of our future episodes. And please, just like you've heard in this conversation, do us a favor and share this information, share this episode and other episodes with a family or friend who might need this help, just like you, so they can stay informed and make confident decisions as they aged. I want to thank you again for listening and tell you I'm looking forward to joining you on our next episode. I'm Phil Tower. Thank you for listening.